So, what I want to do this morning was start with a discussion about last night's film for those of us who had a chance to see it, and just wanted to see what any thoughts were. Maybe we should cover the definition of discussion first. Different to presentation.
It is a misery of capitalism.
Oh yes, that's a nice expression. Say it again.
A misery of capitalism.
The misery of capitalism. It's interesting, though, that they were promoting capitalism, a revised form, as the solution, as well as the present form being the problem. Yeah, that's a very good phrase. Did you make that up?
It just came out of it.
Ah, very good. The misery of capitalism. Anything else? What were some of your thoughts? I was thinking about you when they were covering, the resources, and was wondering what your thoughts were on what they shared with us.
I've always said capitalism's the worst of all economic systems, apart from all the others.
Well, I think they would agree with you there.
On the resource side, it's a tragedy. There are moves now to try to price nature, which may have some benefits because it's not invisible to the economic equation, but then it's also got some dangers, and it might not take into account the full intrinsic value of nature, or
Yes.
it won't.
It can't.
It can't,
Because monetary value only represents one aspect of
exactly.
overall value, yes.
Exactly. My overall feelings of the film was that it was quite good at identifying some of the crises and some of the problems of the current system. The answers that it gave were fairly cursory and didn't really didn't bring forth hope. It just kind of said,
This is a possibility.
this and this might work, but
and
without
it's up to
actually
you to get on with
exploring. And then I didn't feel it brought in the spiritual side at all. It was just kind of more sort of unspiritual answers to unspiritual problems.
Right. Yes, that's a very good point, actually. And maybe, a lot, I think, of these days are people who are trying to surf that line and not preach to the choir, but try to gather the attention, get the attention of those who are very stuck in a certain mindset about how things are and how things work, how things should be. So maybe the wake-up call for them has to be sort of in their frame of reference.
I was at the World Forum for Natural Capital last week, and there was a Cambridge economist, and he was talking about the minimum state of the environment in which the economy could survive. So on the positive side there was a recognition that we're trashing it. On the negative side, it was, if we only trash it this much, we can still get on with all our
business as
usual.
Yeah.
So there's some, and then he was talking about pricing nature, which is then grossly unjust, because it means that only wealthy people who probably cause the problem would then get access to nature, and the majority of people just won't be able to get access.
And what were your thoughts on the resource tax that was proposed?
I mean, I'm not an economist, but it always strikes me as bonkers to tax labour so heavily and tax resources so lightly. So certainly an economic shift is needed.
Rebalancing there. Yeah. To tax, we tax labour and capital heavily, except for we don't tax capital when it exceeds a certain amount, because so then there are all sorts of loopholes. So it's only the middle band that really get hammered.
Yes, I mean, with all the offshore tax havens, it's quite apparent that if you're above a certain level, there's enough money for you to pay a lawyer for you not to pay tax.
To restructure.
So only people on below a certain income actually contribute to the state, to the schools, to the roads, and the other people they do, but as a proportion of their income, they simply don't.
Yeah, I was I did enjoy the film. That's the second time I've seen it. And I did enjoy it because I thought maybe for us, none of these ideas are new. We're already a little skeptical about the system that's in place. But I thought it did quite a good job of at least outlining some of the dominant principles and behaviours that are currently in place that most people just only see the surface of. You only see the sort of shiny outdoors of your bank. You might not think about the activities that go on and how it's connected to government. And this was a little bit US-centric. Interesting for me that phrase, the White House Wall Street corridor. And, you know, we have ideas about that's probably going on, but I thought it was quite good in laying out some of the common things that we need to notice and how that has developed. I think the one thing that hits most people when they see a film like that, whether it's an environmental film or a film about our economy, is that the scale of the problem is massive. It is incredibly interwoven with every other system, and that we as individuals are almost entirely helpless to do anything in the face of it. That's sort of that sense. Even if you feel empowered and you're already proactive in some aspect of mitigating that, there is a sense of they've got the system covered. I agree with you that the suggestions for how it could be done differently weren't explored, and maybe the front end of the film could be shorter or more succinct, and then they could explore that a little bit more. But maybe that wasn't its goal. But I do think it is worthwhile for us to keep our minds alert, our perceptions alert, and at least engage with, even if we don't agree with it, just to engage with these different ideas. And I think it helps us with a sense of discernment. I also agree that the unseen elements were not mentioned. For me, unseen, where you would call them spiritual, I would call them the unseen elements. The things that are harder to see, therefore harder to experience, therefore harder to measure, therefore harder to quantify. How do you create a system where those things have a relationship to the things that you can measure and quantify? So how do you join, and this is what we've been talking about all along, how do you get the unseen and the seen worlds to merge? For me, it's interesting because, you know, if we look at the image of man, and with this section representing the higher self and this section representing our humanness, what lies in the middle is that crossing point, which we looked at yesterday, which is inspiration and motivation, and that the role of the heart in being able to bridge heaven and earth, being able to see both aspects of our nature. And if you look at the way that our societal systems are set up, they seem to be uniquely lacking heart, this sense of heart. A sense of compassion or care. They seem to, you know, serve the few at the expense of the many. And I believe that this lack of heart, there's certainly also lack of acknowledgement of the invisible worlds, but that lack of heart as the bridging point is something that needs to be addressed. And I do believe it is coming. There are many, you made the point at breakfast, there are many, many, many fantastic and worthy initiatives. So it's not like we're completely without hope. What I'm interested in is not so much, I'm definitely interested and fascinated and in admiration of all those little pockets of initiatives going on around the world. And, you know, I'm part of some of them. But I'm really most fascinated by, and what I'm trying to present here, is an overarching system or framework into which everything can fit. And even though we don't have time to explore it in depth, it would probably take us 2 weeks to go into this in depth, to look at the hidden design in depth. Again, we were talking this morning at breakfast about, you know, it could be fascinating to really explore, you know, the mathematics of fractals and what that can tell us and give us. It could be really fascinating to look at some of the emerging science and what that can lend to the conversation. And these are all avenues we can take. Take note, conference office. These are all future events. By definition, we would miss something out. So what I'm trying to present here is just this overarching framework where you can find, no matter what it is, or any aspect of life, you can find what it is, why it is, and how it can be transformed. So you can find your way into it to unlock it. And of course, I mean, I thought the ending was a little strange. It sounded like it belonged to another film because they're sort of giving you these hard-hitting economic principles, and then they ended with, and of course, it's all up to you. Just go off and transform yourselves and everything will be better, which is rather open-ended. Nevertheless, I think that there is truth in that as each of us transform individually, we become a nucleus. And if we understand the science, or science spirituality, they're actually the same thing in many cases, or the truth, one could say, about how energy systems work, you can become a nucleus that then affects your local environment, and then you can gather with like-minded people, and you become more of a beacon and a power point. And I think that's what Findhorn has done over the years. And so now, you know, you don't have to have the founders physically present cranking out these ideas and this energy. It is now, it's come into the air around us. And we can step into those forms and start from where we are now. Any other thoughts on the film? Yes.
Yeah, what I'm left with is there's a common feeling of helplessness, as you've said, and it exists in all society, and sadly it also can exist in Findhorn, where you feel helpless against who's in charge, what, where. Yeah. So the same thing with banks, it's the same thing with loads of things, and unfortunately the masses are taken advantage of. When I was a farmer till I was 40, never knew anything about, you know, benefits, and tax was not heard of because you paid the accountant, just as this man said, pay the accountant the amount you'd probably pay in tax to save you all sorts of stuff. So when I became a worker, I was so surprised. My God, I have to pay tax every week. I've paid national insurance. I have to pay this, that, and the next thing. And I could get away with it before, and then suddenly, when I'm down here, I can't. Yeah. And I think also involved with recycling and that sort of, the idea that one person can make a difference is the biggest clincher to getting people to recycle. Once you believe that when I do this, to put that there instead of there, I am making a difference. And it's about valuing people, you know, about their contribution. And I would just wonder, if there's 7 billion people in the world, could they all say, we don't want this? Yes. What happens then? But yes, we are so controlled by the media, the newspapers, everything. Yeah. So controlling. And I know even my own family, a lot of times I can't have a decent discussion with them because they just say, that's rubbish. Yes. No, look at the paper. Look, the Daily Mail says this is happening. You know? Oh, the Daily Mail, don't get me started. Okay, so maybe it's, I'm taking it back to the individual. Yes. That what can the individual do? And that's what I've got from your workshop so far, is it comes back to me. Yeah. And, you know, I need to pray for the strength to make a change as an individual. Yes. And then collectively, things will happen. Thank you. Thank you for that. It's a very important point. And who's in charge? Raise your hand if you think the government's in charge.
No one? No one. Raise your hand in response to the question, who's in charge? Raise your hand if you think the government is in charge. Does it? You do. So the government determines how everything turns out.
They can't do that. They can set the scene.
They can set the scene. What are your thoughts, Martina?
Economy.
The economists.
Yes, government is run by lobbyists.
Yeah.
So thank you. Thanks for the reminder. I think it's really where the money is, and those administrating the money really have the means to defend or implement their interests. That's the feeling I get, and that's how capitalism works in my understanding.
So who's in charge? You think it isn't really the economists, although they advise on fiscal policy, and you saw though they're secretly...
So it's the industry behind it.
So what you mean is the sort of the high net worth individuals who control the dominant assets.
Yeah.
So you've had your vote, you've cast it. So like, it's coming out from the ballot box and going back in again. You can re-vote, you can do anything you like. That's the beauty, you can change your mind. Who thinks it's sort of those guys who are controlling the sort of global business interests, you know, the corporations? Corporations, come on, put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. Who thinks it's the banks? Also banks. Who thinks it's the banks? They're a big part to play. It's 1.5. So for those of you who haven't cast a vote, out of the 8.5 who have, what would you say then?
I think we individually are responsible for everything.
Who agrees that individuals are responsible? 3 votes! Gosh, you are a very important man.
It's the individuals and their elected representatives. That's
He means individuals as in the common man. Yeah, the man on the street. The workers.
Oh, I see it as a systemic problem. So everyone is beholden to everybody else. So the government is beholden to the voters and to industry, so they look to seek to do their bidding. The consumers look to government and to industry, and they say we can't do anything as individuals. These big, powerful entities can do it, and corporations expect their customers to take the lead and government to regulate, but governments are largely beholden to industry and are not looking to regulate, and so the whole thing's got horribly stuck in the mud, and no individual group is going to get it out, and it's only going to be a systemic change that will release us.
Yeah. You know, the systemic change movement is really struggling, though. The systemic change movement is struggling. I've been part of meetings where all the leaders of the systemic change movement, going back over the last 30, maybe 40 years in some cases, for the pioneers, have got together to, you can imagine what that meeting was like. It was like, they're stuck because they're angry and they're frustrated and they're trying to push a certain idea or model, and it's all theoretical. It's all theoretical. And as soon as, like Don Beck and Ken Wilber found this when they tried to go in and revise South Africa, you know, with spiral dynamics. Whenever you meet the actual human realm that you want to change, theory isn't enough. And so we have to find a way to get inside the mechanism that is on automatic pilot like this and just going through our lives like this and not thinking, not using. We're not utilizing the power of our choice. We're not taking responsibility, and therefore we're not making a contribution. We don't understand the mechanics of transformation. We don't understand, as you rightly said, we don't understand the unseen world. It isn't factored in. And it's that which is causing this absolute deadlock. So we can't just, you know, meditate, reside up here. We can't just push from below or draw from above. We have to be able to understand the whole system, right from the most amorphous, right down into the, you know, the deepest, darkest places of, you know, brutal regimes in Africa. We have to understand the whole thing as one mechanism. We have to be able to operate across that mechanism, and we have to be able to transform our own individual experience. And that is the only way and I absolutely do believe in systemic change. I just don't think that the current attempts at systemic change are going to work because they are largely theoretical, and we all know what it's like. We've had so much theory, you know, from the church, from science, from academia, and very little of it translates into, you know, it's like putting chemicals on the soil instead of good compost. You know, we need to be able to access that point in us that is stuck and move beyond it. And we need to be able to educate people how to do it and be able to do it at scale. So that's why I'm interested in a framework and a system that can both provide that and scale. And I'm not saying, you know, that this is the answer to all the world's problems. It is, as you know, everything else happens to be an offering, an approach. But I would like to see more other approaches take into account that full range, and to be able not just conceptual but also experiential, and also have that element of implementation. So our model works off a concept, practice, application model. So first you learn, then you experience, and then you implement in the world, you apply it. And those three elements must be present for change to take place. Real and sustained change to take place. Because you first have to absorb a new idea. You have to take on a new way of thinking. You then have to be able to be the new idea, you know, that expression, be the change you wish to see in the world. You have to be able, like we were practicing yesterday with, it's not enough to hope that we can be that blue line state. We've got to be able to tangibly step into it so that it is a living reality. And so our thoughts are consistent with it. Our experience is consistent with it. Our words, our actions, our choices are consistent with that elevated state. Then we produce different outcomes. So if we want to shift the needle of where we are to where we want to go, we have to have that process of integration of new ideas, which comes with the experiential, and a healthy reference point and reverence for the beauty and the power of nature and the divine, you know. Above us and below us, we've got this incredible intelligence and beauty, and we are in this middle realm, you know, cutting ourselves off from both. We have to integrate those two to be able, and what is the best integrator? The heart. I'll show you some tomorrow morning, put aside some time to show you some research. And I can show you some of the research on the heart. An incredible processor and integrator. and allows us to step forward into a different place. And without the education and the experience we then build those into the frameworks that we create. So I was having a conversation last night with, is it Jose? Jose. So it's different in Portuguese. Okay, no wonder you didn't answer when I called you Jose yesterday. Jose, about, you know, the education of the young is so important, that if we transformed our education, then the next crop of people coming through would be already operating on a new paradigm. And we send, funnily enough, I found out yesterday, you already knew, we send our children to the same school, so we're giving them a good start. It's a great school. But we need to do more. It needs to be more widespread. I've had lots of conversations about how we bring this into education. Yes?
So a comment from the live stream from Jane, and she was saying, I think who is in charge is the patriarchal mindset. Transforming our individual experiences, transforming language and mindset.
Mm.
She's very, wanting to use in words like person instead of man, human instead of, like, I think earlier you said middleman,
Mm-hmm.
and she was saying, I think that is the middle person, so she's very...
I'm not known for being politically correct, but I can try. I might forget halfway through the sentence. Patriarchal middle person. If I had to vote, I would probably come around here for the reasons that I've just outlined, that I think it needs to start with individuals. Individuals are the nucleus, but then I think we need to build a framework around individuals, which is the organisation, and then another around that, which is society, which will go out to the globe. So I think that commonality of principles across that spectrum is what's going to help to change us. Because this is so complex, I just seem to have a bad karmic relationship with this particular board, don't I? Because it is complex, because there are 7 billion of us currently, and as the gentleman said last night, in I think 2075, it's mooted to be 9 billion. Just as all the fossil fuels run out, and I was calculating, how old will I be? I'll be a very old lady by that time. God help them. These systems are complex. There are a lot of people. There are a lot of interlocking systems, and we can't make it too simplistic. But I don't believe it is too simplistic to say that we need to, in order to coordinate such a massive, complex system, we have to have commonality of understanding. Otherwise, you're always going to have thought wars, ideology wars. We have to have and that doesn't mean that we're all the same religion, we all eat the same food, we all dress the same way, we all listen to the same music at all. Diversity is a beautiful thing. But underneath that diversity, we need to recognize our, not just common humanity, but our common spirituality, which goes deeper than our common humanity, because common spirituality means that we are brethren to the creatures and the planet, as well as the angels and the hierarchies. We are part of that bigger system. And we must run on common principles. And those principles are not deterministic of behavior. And this is one of the things that religion seeks to do, or aggressive ideologies seek to do, to seek to control our behavior. And we've seen that in human history, it just doesn't work, because we are essentially seeking freedom. We don't want to be shackled. We don't want to be told what to do. We want it to come from within. And when it does, it is a very powerful gesture. It's an empowering gesture. But how do you get 7 or 9 billion people to all be operating in a way that is respectful and considerate of one another, whilst also giving expression to their individuality? And common principles, universal principles, are one way that we could do that. If we have a common platform of understanding, an understanding of how the whole mechanism works. And this is why lately I have shown more and more interest in science, because they're finally coming to the party and contributing to show us things that we can't see with our own senses, or even perhaps with our spiritual investigation. This common platform of understanding about the whole mechanism of life works, and how that predisposes us towards certain abilities. Yeah, so the structure is encoded with the nature, which gives rise to the function. If we knew that, all we have to do is log on to that and allow it to power us, fuel us, infuse us, imbue us with those qualities, and then our individuality can come in and decide what we want to do, how we want to do it, how we want to eat, dress, talk, walk, where we want to live, how we want to earn a living. But if it's imbued with that background knowledge and experience and understanding, it automatically creates universally beneficial outcomes. And they can't fight. If you come back all the way back upstream to examine the fundamental coalface of life, there is no elements there that are in conflict. So conflict is not a natural outcome, it is a created outcome through misunderstanding. So if we can work from those very deep-rooted truths and principles, then we don't need to worry. We're trying to legislate what's already created and so manifest and tidy it up at the edges. It's too late. We need to come back and work from the center and let that flow out. Just like if we want to clean up a river, a polluted river, we don't just go to the end of the river. Well, it's easy to get in the river here. You know, the path leads right up to this end of the river. I'm just going to tidy up the end of the river, and there's more pollutants coming downstream. If you want to clean up a river system, clean up what's happening up here and notice, let that flow down, yes? So in the same way, we need to log on to a pure source of energy, which is like a fresh impetus, which naturally predisposes us towards our inspiration, our motivation, our thinking, our feeling, our actions. And of course, our speech comes in there too. So for me, it sounds, perhaps this sounds idealistic, perhaps it even sounds utopian. I don't believe it is. I've worked now for 30 years in this arena, and I have seen the change that takes place within individuals. I've seen the possibility for that influence to come into organizations. It takes much more effort, concerted effort. It takes much more willingness and vision and determination. And then for that to be the influence that comes out through our society and into the world. I don't see another way of doing it. What time's our tea break today?
Usually it's 10:30.
Mm-hmm.
Flexible.
Yeah.
It's flexible. Ah, how about that?
Yeah, we said 10:30 to 11 on here.
Okay,
Teas are available until 11.
okay. Oh, and I know what I wanted to say. I knew I shouldn't have sat down. Who's in charge? I believe we cannot. There will be planetary influences, there will be societal influences, there will be organizational influences which will find their way, they will create some kind of effect in our life. None of us are immune from that. I recently watched a documentary on people who live off-grid, all around the world. Have you seen that? It's called Off Grid. It's a documentary. And it's not particularly exciting. It's, you know, lots of people and solar panels and, you know, but it is, what was fascinating for me was not the fact that, you know, they had sort of carted this technology to just the back of beyond and built these systems and maintained these systems. What was fascinating for me was the mindset of the people who do that. Some of these people leave their house or their property once a year and go to interact with the town, which is, you know, 100 or 500 kilometers away. They live completely off grid. So those people have very little influence from organizations and society. They do have influence from, say, weather patterns, you know, and nature has an effect on them. But they're not, those individuals, and that live like that in the world, you know, are probably very few. They're a fraction of our world population. Most of us are somehow part of this system, and we feel very affected by it because we feel so tied into it. You can't get a mortgage unless you've got a good track record of using your credit card, but what if you want a mortgage but you don't want a credit card? You know, all of this stuff. And if we feel that the influence is coming towards us, so if we feel that even just in our family, other people's influence is more powerful than ours, we're always going to be absorbing that. And because of the way thought imprints energy, if we imagine that those external environments are stronger than us, then we will allow them to influence us. But actually, that's not how it works. That's not how it's designed to work. So we've been looking at the fact that we as individuals are the catalyst for our experience. And even though I've been encouraging you to take care of that on an individual level, your reaction, your response to every aspect of your life, whether that's your family, your work environment, your community, your society, or your planet, that is your responsibility. And I think when we as individuals start to realize that we are in charge of our experience, and that's where it starts. That's the only way it can work. When we take back that control, in the nicest sense, and start to really empower ourselves, and we start to live in that blue line state, that becomes our green line state, then we feel that things are possible and that we are more prepared to move towards them and carry them out. And that's when new things come into being. So we have to shape and make our own future, but we have to do it. We can't wait for a government to legislate. We can't even wait for the local council to decide to do recycling. You know, we can't wait for a community garden to start. You know, we can't wait for any of those things. We have to take charge of our own being. So I believe ultimately we are in charge. These other things are part of our society. They won't go away anytime soon. We have to find a way to interact with them, but not in a way that they are dominant and we are helpless. We need to change that equation. We actually have far more power than we realize to influence our experience, influence our environments, influence other people. And you may not, through meditating every day and being completely in charge of your own experience, change, you know, the central bank's interest rate. But if enough of us were to carry out ourselves in a certain way, you never know what might change further down the track. Luckily, I do work with some bankers. So there's hope, there's a bit of hope there too. Anyway, I think we should meditate because I think the tea break's going to come upon us sooner rather than later. Thank you for all your contributions in response to the film. You know, you made the comment, this gentleman made the comment the other day about how man can express beauty artistically, and this mosque is a beautiful example. Arabic art. And very much like a sort of, it's got that beehive-esque. And every single one of those tiles is laid by hand in that mosaic. Isn't that amazing? That's just one wall and ceiling. Oh. So it does show you what's possible when we work with those principles. As you notice your breath, just check in with your physical body and just check that your spine is nicely upright. That there's space right along the spinal column and even through the center of the head right up into the crown. That the arms are gently resting and no tension in them. Check that your bottom is relaxed. Sometimes when we seek to sit up straight, we tense our bottom. Check that your bottom is relaxed. That your legs are rested. And unless you're cross-legged, check that your feet are firmly on the ground. Drop the chin in very slightly towards the chest and open the back of the head and neck. And when we sit in this way, we automatically feel more competent, more capable. And we can allow ourselves to feel ennobled, so that we can display, express, experience the nobility of being human. It isn't all about struggle and drama. There is a beauty to humanness. That can often be overlooked. And just picture an image of a cross where the vertical axis is going through the uprightness of your body, your being. And then the horizontal axis is going through the heart as if you had your arms outstretched. We see the heart as the crossing point. Between heaven and earth, between higher self and humanness. And the heart is the realm of the soul. Our soulfulness. And the heart responds to the same encoded qualities that our whole being responds to. So now just find those qualities of expansion and light and harmony within the heart. And as you notice them within your experience. As you continue to notice them, they magnify, amplify. It feels as if they are building within our experience, gaining strength and momentum. We don't need to force the heart into any engineered gesture. The heart is naturally designed with its own qualities, gifts, talents, abilities, strengths. Our role is to use consciousness to notice, acknowledge, accept, allow, express, and enjoy them. And let us begin with the quality of courage. When we hold our conscious attention in the heart, when we log on to that ongoing stream of energy flowing from our higher self through into the heart, we notice its strength and its steadfastness. So we don't have to create for ourselves an image of being indomitable, unassailable, invincible. The heart has its own way of creating courage, steadiness, and strength. Notice as you allow the heart to continue to just radiate that it provides you with a sense of reassurance. There's something about the experience of the heart which says everything is okay. There's something about the experience of the heart which creates a sense of safety to explore further, expand further. And courage doesn't always have to set us off on adventures and quests, or even conquests. The courage of the heart can just gently inform you that you are capable and able to take on a new idea, new behavior, that you can change your experience, that you can rewrite a pattern, even if it has been with you for a long time. And you feel as if the heart is on your side. Encouraging, championing. And although the heart is well suited to love and care, appreciation, gratitude, compassion, it is also excellently suited to courage, steadfastness, and reassurance. As human beings, we need to find our own source of steadiness, our own source of courage. We need to be able to reassure ourselves and not always seek it externally. We need to provision ourselves internally for a journey of change and transformation, just as we would take provisions for an exterior journey. We cannot rely on those elements of life which come and go. We must seek those elements we can rely on that are eternal, trustworthy, dependable. And the assistance from the heart is always, always available. So existence has stocked the fridge. All we need to do is take consciousness to go and open it. And now let your heart be filled with whatever brings it the most joy and happiness. Whatever makes your heart sing, let your heart be filled with the thoughts and pictures of that. And just notice what that is for you. What is it that makes your heart sing? What is it that gives you a sense of just simple happiness? And notice that the heart does not operate in isolation. When it is singing, your whole being is affected. You are more able to receive impulses from spirit. And likewise, that energy flows on and seeps into your mind, your feeling life, and your body. The full spectrum of your being is one complete system. And no aspect of ourself works in isolation. The influence is felt upstream and downstream. And notice how a change of heart, for this is what we have facilitated, a change of heart precipitates a new and revised perception of self based on a new and revised experience of self. When the heart is open, we have a kinder, gentler, more productive relationship with our self. And just deepen the breath, slowly, breath by breath, just take in a little bit more. And as you're undertaking that, allow not only the physical body, but every single energy body in your whole integrated, interlocking system, allow all of your energy bodies to expand, to make new space for new ideas and new possibilities. combine that with the deepening of the breath. And notice that the word for breathing in, inspiration, is the same word for taking on board fresh, new energy in the form of ideas and light, possibility. And whenever you feel ready, you can open your eyes. Keep your gaze down towards the floor and just notice that there are other people in this room, camera crew included. And just share with the room, this room and the next, that energy of your heart singing. Just share your gifts, share your joy, share your light. And if you feel to, you can just try letting your mouth smile gently. And just notice that gives an extra little zing to the heart, to the energy. And then just stretch. It's always very helpful to stretch after meditation. Now, unless they've lied to me, I think we are all due a cup of tea. So let's come back, let's take a slightly shorter break, 25 minutes instead of 30, and come back at 11 o'clock.